What's up, y'all? I'm back with another React video. We got another Nick Crowley video. Um, Make sure you guys show love to this guy, by the way. I know I don't say it all the time, but I always do put it in the description if you guys do read the description. And make sure to subscribe if you guys want to stick around, and like the video if you guys do like it, and comment down below anything you guys want to see. Or I do have a Discord channel that you can join, and I do have a channel that has like React video ideas, game ideas, like, you know, anything you guys want to see. And also tune into the streams for it, because I will be playing the games that you guys recommend on stream and also uploading them to YouTube as well. But it would be great if you guys tuned into the streams and, you know, had a fun time. So let's just get into this video. Like I said, another Nick Crowley. This is gonna be insane. His videos are always great. So again, make sure you check him out. And let's get into this.
Fifth alarm. Working structure fire. 7741 Liberty Road Drive.
It's 9 a.m. on May 18th, 2024. Residents of Charlotte, North Carolina wake up to the smell and sight of black smoke billowing up into the sky. The source: a massive 7-story apartment complex home to 239 luxury units, or at least what should have been luxury units. At the time, the structure was still under construction, meaning that thankfully no residents were living there. But this in and of itself presented two major problems. The first was that, in its current state, the top 5 floors were primarily just the bones of the structure, made almost entirely of wood and insulation, making the building as a whole extremely flammable, meaning that although the fire had started out relatively small, it was quickly going to consume the entire complex if it wasn't put out quickly. Which brings us to the second and even more glaring problem. The building was actively under construction when the fire started, and that morning 17 construction workers had clocked in, all of whom were now in grave danger. And by the time the firefighters arrived on the scene,
Damn!
the situation was already dire. And so firefighters rushed in, finding a large group of the employees and leading them out to safety.
Yo, which one of
Though
y'all
when
did
they
it
made it
mess up?
outside, they made the horrifying realization that they had only found 15 of them. Somewhere within that labyrinth of burning wooden walls, 2 men were left behind, trapped and calling out to anyone who might hear them. And these pleas weren't just being made to those on the scene, as in the following minutes, one of the trapped men, 30-year-old Demonte Sherrill, would take out his phone, open up Facebook, and go live, revealing the horrifying reality that both he and his friend had found themselves in.
Somebody send help, we're in South Park. Help!
Today, we're going to be showing our friends the
Bro, trying to find a way out. Why are we going on Facebook Live?
If you own a computer, here's how to get the most out of it. Watch this.
Oh, nah, I don't like that. Bro, it's coming out the freaking monitor. Bro, yo, I just gotta pause this. This is freaking amazing production, bro. I know I keep saying this, bro, but really shout out to Nick Crowley, man. His production is crazy.
Yo, I'm at South Park right now. At work, the building on fire, and I can't get out.
The stream showed Demonte Sherrill and his friend Ruben Holmes somewhere deep within the prospective apartment complex, and though the fire hadn't yet reached them, the smoke certainly had, blanketing them in a thick impenetrable fog, not only making breathing extremely difficult, but also making it nearly impossible for rescuers to see them.
It's getting harder and harder for them to see us. We're gonna
Bro,
have
I'd be
find
moving
her
trying to get out
sleep.
there, not gonna lie. Bro, I start praying.
The building on fire, I'm trapped inside, me and my man.
This was likely one of the reasons why Demonte chose to start this livestream, hopeful that it could show rescuers exactly where they were. But based on the footage, their positioning was far from ideal. They were on the second highest floor, floor 6, which had only one access point, a single stairway that was on the complete opposite side of the building. And based on their testimony in the footage, something had clearly blocked their path to that one remaining exit, meaning that the only other way out would be to jump. Though at 6 stories in the air, and falling into what would likely be the heart of the fire, this would have meant certain death. There was quite literally nowhere for them to go. Rescue was their only hope.
Yo, this building is on fire. I'm at work. Somebody send help, we're in South Park.
Seemingly realizing this, DeMonte began to grow more desperate, yelling out into the void of smoke, while Ruben can be seen in the background waving his phone flashlight, with both men doing anything they could to help rescuers find them. Before...
No, it's gonna collapse.
the stream abruptly ends. Rescuers were aware of the unfolding situation on the 6th story. They first tried to reach the men by using a massive crane with a basket attached, which can actually be seen in DeMonte's livestream. Though in it, you can see that it's also facing the complete wrong direction, as the smoke was just that impenetrable. However, at one point, it's believed that the crane operator did actually see these men, but the blaze was just too extreme, leading to the operator himself having to be rescued. This left only one real option for saving DeMonte and Ruben. They were going to have to go in after them. And so they climbed that stairway up to floor 6 and started their trek to the opposite end of the structure. Though before they could even make it halfway, the rescuers were relegated to a slow crawl, as the inferno around them raged more and more intensely, and the smoke grew thicker and thicker. Though that's when they began to hear screaming. Somewhere lost in that maze, Ruben and DeMonte were yelling as loud as they could for help. This sound was a sign that they were getting close. Though just then, rescuers would be met with another sound.
Bro, who lit this on fire?
All companies working 7741 Liberty Road Drive, evacuate structure per command. All companies working 7741 Liberty Road Drive, evacuate structure.
Command all companies, this will be defensive at this time. We'll be ready for this side to collapse. Everybody get out of the collapse zone. Confirming you are coming out, but you're not out of the building.
With the order being made for all of them to evacuate, as by this point, the structure was engulfed in flames, and a collapse was imminent. The firefighters tried to call out to the two in one last attempt to guide them towards rescue, but they never came. In fact, at that point, the structure fell eerily silent. They would leave that structure without DeMonte or Ruben, and minutes later, the fire consumed the entire building, with the temperature inside reaching 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Before
it collapsed.
Oh, damn, that's bad.
it would eventually topple to the ground. And inside, DeMonte and Ruben would become the sole fatalities of this catastrophe.
Holy.
Yo, I'm at South Park right now, at work, in a building on fire, and I can't get out.
Oh, man.
It's getting harder and harder for them to see us.
Knowing how the story ends would make this live stream difficult for anyone to watch, but what I find most upsetting about it is that the majority of those who initially watched this were his own friends and family that followed him on Facebook, with these viewers including his own mother. And a lot of them probably had no idea he even worked this job, as he had just been hired that week.
No
His brother had
way.
also caught the stream as it was happening, and actually rushed over to the scene where he pleaded with the firefighters to watch the footage. But despite doing the best they could, there was just too much working against them to save DeMonte and Ruben. Following an investigation into the fire, it was discovered that the crew was using an organic foam insulation, which was known to be extremely flammable and produce thick black smoke. And this became deadly when the machine used to spray that insulation caught fire, sending the whole building up in flames, where they had yet to install any sort of smoke detector or alarm system to alert the crew of a fire. Making matters worse, there had been a temporary set of stairs made right where the two men had been trapped, but that stairwell had just been removed in order to make way for the permanent set of stairs.
Bro.
Because of this and a myriad of other issues, the companies involved with this construction were forced to pay a fine of $50,000 and are currently being sued by the families of both victims. But regardless of the outcome, nothing will ever make up for the loss of DeMonte Sherrill and Ruben Holmes.
Bro, no way. And why were they the only two, man, that didn't make it, like...
Things were getting concerning. Johnny Cashman spoke to his family nearly every single day, but now, on the 6th day without receiving any communication from him, they knew that something was wrong. Johnny lived in Lynchburg, Virginia, hundreds of miles away from his home in Maine, and so, being unable to check
Speaking
on
of
him
puppy
themselves, they called police in the area and requested a welfare check. Police entered Johnny's apartment on the 19th of April, 2022, and hours later, they would call his parents with the news that they had found their son area and requested a welfare check. And so, being unable to check on him, lived in the next day without receiving any communication from him, they knew that something was wrong. Johnny lived in Lynchburg, Virginia, hundreds of miles away from his home in Maine, and so, being unable to check on him themselves, they called police in the area and requested a welfare check. Police entered Johnny's apartment on the 19th of April, 2022, and hours later, they would call his parents with the news that they had found their son dead on the floor. According to the officers, Johnny had experienced some sort of medical event that led to GI bleeding that ultimately claimed his life. But this made no sense to Johnny's family. He was only 38 years old and had just been given a clean bill of health after a full medical exam only 4 months prior. It was so out of the blue, in fact, that they even asked if there were any signs of a struggle or if there was any evidence that he may have taken his own life. But they were assured that there was no trauma, no drugs, and nothing suspicious found on the scene, and that, as shocking as it was, his cause of death was entirely natural, and had likely just been spurred on by drinking and tobacco use, with the only solace being that Johnny didn't suffer, as they stated that he had died instantly. Because of this, no autopsy was performed, as the case seemed as straightforward as it gets, and despite his family questioning if they should get their own autopsy, they were told by officers that it wouldn't be necessary. And so, Johnny's body was cremated and sent back to Maine, in what seemed to be the end of Johnny Cashman's story. Ten days after Johnny's body was discovered, his ex-girlfriend and her mother made their way back to his apartment in order to retrieve some of her belongings. She knew that re-entering the space was going to be difficult, but ultimately, there was no way she could have prepared for what was waiting for her inside.
Oh, no way he's in there, right? Oh.
There was blood everywhere. It was pooled in the bathrooms, wiped on doors, spread all over the living space, and was even found on a chair and a banister. But the most horrifying part of it all was the walls. They were covered in splattered blood, which revealed long streaking handprints. It was something straight out of a horror movie, and although Johnny's cause of death was deemed natural, what they found in that apartment seemed anything but.
What?
Traumatized by what they were witnessing, the pair snapped multiple photos of the bloodshed and ran out of the unit, directly into Johnny's neighbor. This neighbor revealed that they believed something far worse than a medical emergency had happened to Johnny, as they had a security camera mounted to their door which faced Johnny's unit, and on the day of his passing, it captured something incredibly disturbing. The footage shows Johnny making his way up the flight of stairs leading to his apartment at around 3:03 p.m. Nothing seems out of the ordinary at all, though it is noteworthy that he was holding an empty glass, perhaps insinuating that he had been drinking. But this doesn't seem to impair his movements much at all, as he punches in the code and enters his home, just as he did every other day. But moments later, something happens inside that unit, and while it goes unseen, it doesn't go unheard.
What the fuck? What are you doing? Yo, what the fuck, dude?
I'm a mute chat because my dog.
What are you doing, man?
The audio seems to depict a man yelling, asking
Someone was
repeatedly,
in there
"What are you
waiting
doing?"
for him.
and begging for something to stop. On top of this, you can also hear loud thuds and banging, almost as if things were falling over inside, or there was some sort of physical altercation, before the unit then goes quiet just a few seconds later. It was unclear if this voice was Johnny's, or perhaps someone else who had been inside the unit, but regardless, one thing was apparent from this audio. There was someone else in that apartment, despite the fact that Johnny lived alone. And just 7 minutes later, this unseen person would emerge. This clearly wasn't Johnny, And after leaving the unit, the anonymous man nearly makes it out of the building before he seems to change his mind. Turning around and walking back up the stairs before fiddling with the door handle, touching it only with his sleeve, like he was wiping off his fingerprints.
Bro, who is this
He
guy?
then walks down the stairs and stops once again, where he seems to be in a state of shock over whatever had just transpired, before he composes himself and walks out of the building. But the footage wasn't quite finished yet.
Ain't no way he comes back.
Just 1 minute later, you can hear Johnny shouting for help from inside the apartment, to which moments after, he stops, and no further sound or activity would come from Johnny's unit until police arrived 5 days later. The footage and the scene at the apartment seemed to contradict what Johnny's family had been told about his death. The blood all over made it obvious that Johnny's death had not happened in an instant, and this, coupled by the presence of this unknown man who was clearly distraught and wiping off his fingerprints, as well as the sound of the apparent struggle inside, seemed to point towards something much more sinister than what was initially conveyed to the family. But even with this footage, police still believed that Johnny's death was due to a medical emergency, as they quickly changed their initial story, saying that the blood spread was due to uncontrollable vomiting, and that Johnny had in fact likely suffered, at least for a short while. But this medical emergency wasn't elaborated on, as they didn't truly know what caused it, as no autopsy was ever performed, nor could one ever be performed,
Or do you
as
guys
by this
think that the
point,
killer is a
Johnny
cop?
was already cremated,
'Cause
and cremated because of the officer's initial statements. So if Johnny had actually been murdered, which the footage does seem to suggest, there was now virtually no way to prove it. And what makes this even more frustrating is that law enforcement already had this footage. It was collected that very day, and they either didn't fully look through it or didn't think that this was overly suspicious.
what?
But everyone else surely did. And soon this video began making the rounds online, leading to one glaring question being asked. Who is this man? As no one in Johnny's life recognized him. Well, it wouldn't be until May 11th that investigators would finally ID him as Stephen Church. And upon being questioned, he revealed that he had moved to Lynchburg for work, but the opportunity he had lined up fell through shortly after he arrived, leaving him with no money and without a place to stay, which is when he met Johnny, who offered to let him crash on his couch. He supposedly stayed with Johnny for 3 days, and described Johnny as an alcoholic who drank constantly, including on that fateful day. When Johnny arrived home, Stephen claims that he started drunkenly yelling at him about paying rent, which led to the two getting into a verbal altercation. But he insisted that this altercation never turned physical, and that he left immediately after, to which he quickly went back to clean his prints because he was afraid that Johnny would try and have him arrested for squatting. And having already racked up 2
My
felonies
ass,
in his
bro.
life, Stephen was paranoid about going back to jail. But when Stephen was leaving, he did mention seeing Johnny hunched over the toilet as if he were going to vomit, but he claims to have left before this so-called medical emergency started. This is the gist of Stephen's account from that day, but the problem is, it doesn't really match up with what we're hearing in the video.
What the fuck? What are you doing? Yo, what the fuck, dude?
From the footage, we can hear everything going on in that unit, but at no point do we hear any sort of an argument, nor do we hear anything about rent, with the phrases lending themselves more to a physical struggle rather than a verbal one. In fact, the whole time it appears that we're only hearing one voice. But there is an exception.
Whose voice is it? That's the thing.
To my knowledge, it's never been conclusively determined whose voice is who in the recording, and either scenario paints a far different picture of what may have happened inside that room. But regardless, this audio makes it clear that Stephen's story was fabricated at least to some degree, as he also fails to account for the loud banging in the background. And because of this, his version of events is generally rejected, with most people seeming to believe one of 2 main theories. The first is that, upon arriving home, Johnny and Stephen had gotten into a physical altercation, resulting in Johnny taking some sort of blow to his abdomen, which in turn triggered or exacerbated this medical emergency. GI bleeds are horrific, and can certainly cause the level of bleeding that was found in the apartment, and perhaps seeing all the blood coming from Johnny, Stephen started yelling at him, before deciding to run off, fearing that he would be charged for murder. This would explain Steven's demeanor and actions after leaving the apartment, and why he may have fabricated his story, as he knew or knows that he was directly responsible for Johnny's death. And this blow to the abdomen could have easily been missed by investigators, as the injuries would have been primarily internal. The second theory is that upon arriving home, Johnny naturally experienced a medical emergency leading to this catastrophic GI bleed. Upon seeing this and perhaps being in a state of shock, Steven yelled at him, demanding to know what was happening and telling him to stop, as perhaps he was moving around the apartment and tracking blood everywhere, which would explain the other voice saying, "I can't stop." I could see how this experience would make no sense to Steven, and perhaps just having no idea what was happening, he left and tried to make it look like he was never there, as he was afraid of being blamed for whatever was happening to Johnny, and so he essentially left Johnny there to die, whether knowingly or unknowingly. What bothers me about this theory is why 911 was never called, not only by Steven, but by Johnny too, as his phone was found in the unit with blood on it, implying that he had it in his hand at some point, though it's possible that the massive blood loss just made him too disoriented. Both of these theories seem believable, or at least more so than the explanation that Steven had given. However, in October of 2022, Johnny's case would officially be closed for good, with Steven being cleared of any wrongdoing, as Johnny's death was labeled the same way that it always has been, a medical emergency that couldn't be further elaborated on, with the most relevant evidence being that Steven's shoe prints were not found in the blood, but Johnny's were, implying that he had not been part of the struggle. But in my mind, this can be explained by both theories mentioned previously. Though regardless, without the possibility of an autopsy, this is likely where this case ends for good. But with this disturbing footage, I can't help but think that there was more to the story than we may ever know.
Bro, that's crazy.
It was around 7:30 a.m. on a warm July morning back in 2019. 17-year-olds Bethany Martin and a 16-year-old friend decide to walk to a gas station near their home in San Antonio, Texas. And as the two of them made their way down the road, their path brought them parallel to a drainage ditch, which was often filled with various trash and other discarded material. But on this day, something far more interesting caught their eye. It looked like a man crouching down and leaned up against one of the concrete walls, but the closer they got, the more they realized how unusual his posture was. He looked completely unnatural, and he wasn't moving. And by the time they came face to face with him, the reality of the situation would hit them. They had just found a dead body. This discovery was enough to traumatize anyone, especially two teenagers, and upon calling the police and being sent on their way, Bethany and her friend would make the long walk back home contemplating what to do next, before they eventually landed on the idea of sharing their experience with the world. And so, as soon as they got in the door, they began to set up lights and their camera in order to film a TikTok. The clip showed the two sitting on a couch appearing to be in a state of shock, with the words, "Us remembering we found a dead body this morning," plastered on the screen, offering no other context aside from the description, which simply read, "I wish we were kidding, all respect to the family." Some offered sympathy for the girls, while others viewed their post as insensitive and exploitative, but others weren't even convinced it was real, partially due to this glaring lack of context. But any doubt of this post's legitimacy would be quickly thwarted by a discovery made not even one full day later, as it was revealed that this recording hadn't actually been the only video that these two girls had made on that fateful day. On their walk to the gas station, the girls had stumbled across the body of 25-year-old Marcus Adams, with the young man having seemingly perished earlier that morning, with it being apparent that he had taken his own life. But upon finding Marcus, the girls weren't actually overwhelmed with sadness or even shock, as instead, their focus immediately went to something far different, as something on the man's body had caught their attention. His necklace. The girls really liked it. In fact, the unnamed 16-year-old had said that it matched her fashion perfectly. And so, before police arrived, the two would once again pull out their phone and start recording, showing Bethany approaching the body with her intention being to grab his necklace, which she eventually does, removing the medallion and giving it to her friend, before tossing the chain into the grass nearby, leading to the girls running away from the scene. The 16-year-old would then post that video onto her Snapchat story, for all of her close friends to see.
Bro, for one, that is so disrespectful. Like, what is wrong with you? for you to take a necklace off of someone, and especially someone who took their own life. Like, that is crazy. And to post it on Snapchat for everyone to see, like that's funny or something. Like, that's wild. That's, bro. Oh my god. No brains.
I
no
can't show the
brains.
footage for obvious reasons, but it's truly awful. And just based on the audio alone, you can tell that they're very obviously having fun doing this.
Bro.
You gotta do it now. Now or never. Here, hold me.
I got it.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god.
Bro, and not only your fingerprints are gonna be on the necklace.
There's something
which is gonna
so
make you a
uniquely
suspect.
disturbing about it. It's clear that upon finding the body, there was no real emotional impact on them, at least none that outweighed their desire to steal from it. And as if stealing from this man who had just taken his own life, and posting it for all their friends to see as if it were a joke, wasn't horrible enough, they then immediately posted this other video to TikTok in an attempt to garner sympathy. It's truly awful, and made even more appalling by reports that claim that the 16-year-old had actually worn this medallion in the TikTok video, and in others made following its posting.
No way.
And unfortunately, their actions had even more upsetting consequences,
I thought
as
she'd
the
do it
footage
in
from their
the
Snapchat
grass.
story was quickly downloaded by someone they knew and posted onto an app called Nextdoor, with the footage being totally uncensored. And it was on this app where it's claimed that many of Marcus Adams' own family members would see the footage, many of whom weren't even aware that he was deceased. Just one day after posting this TikTok, both girls were questioned by the police after the incident and the footage was reported to them, and as a result, Bethany would be charged with theft of a human corpse, but would ultimately avoid any serious jail time. Meanwhile, the 16-year-old's name and charges were never publicly released, but we do know that the medallion was returned to the family.
Good.
Perhaps unsurprisingly, Bethany would later come back to her TikTok page shortly after her arrest and share her side of the story, where she gave a less than half-hearted apology, while also claiming to be the victim, saying that her friend had pressured her to steal from Marcus, as well as pressured her into making that TikTok in the first place, because she thought it would be a hit. Though obviously this didn't go over well.
That's crazy.
On December 20th, 1984, 12-year-old Janelle Matthews disappeared from her home in Greeley, Colorado in the evening hours. Earlier that day, she had sung at a Christmas concert with her school's choir, which her parents were unable to attend, as her mother was out of town and her father had gone to her sister's basketball game nearby, leading to Janelle catching a ride home with a friend, being dropped off at her house sometime around 8:15, where she excitedly spoke to her father on the phone, letting him know that she had arrived home safe and sound. Approximately 1 hour
possessed,
later,
bro?
her father, Jim
I look
Matthews,
in the
pulled into
freaking
the driveway
OBS
to
and her
find the garage door
head is
wide
looking
open,
up.
and the house completely empty. Janelle was gone, leaving behind her winter coat and even her shoes, despite it being a frigid, snowy night. And it was within that snow that was quickly
Bro, not another case like this. If you guys haven't seen, I think it was the last Nick Crowley video I did. There was literally a girl who supposedly went missing with no jacket, no shoes. This better
piling
not
up
be another
that
one.
lie one of the only real clues left behind at the scene. Footprints leading directly to one of the home's windows, insinuating that someone had been watching Janelle.
12-year-old Janelle Matthews disappeared from her Greeley home 1 month ago today. It's believed she's the victim of a kidnapping. She has not been seen or heard from since December 20th.
Her disappearance became a big news story almost immediately, with the whole community and really the whole country becoming invested in the fate of this girl, thanks in large part to her being one of the very first milk carton kids, meaning that her face and information about her disappearance was shown on countless milk cartons all across the country to get the word out. And as a result, this case became huge in the mainstream media, as even politicians began to make note of Janelle's story, with then-President Ronald Reagan mentioning the girl in one of his speeches.
I learned about Jonelle Matthews of Greeley, Colorado, 5 days before Christmas. Jonelle disappeared from her home.
Though even with this publicity, this didn't necessarily guarantee results, and soon months would turn to years, and eventually to decades. And all the while, Janelle's whereabouts remained a complete mystery. Eventually, the rise of the internet would start to play a key role in this case, where even in the late 2010s, over 3 decades after she had vanished, Her case was still being shared and still being discussed, just as it had been 3 decades prior, with it still being a point of contention
I
for
hate my dog.
politicians, even as recently as 2019.
Someone come buy him from me.
When a man running for governor of Idaho mentioned her disappearance in a Facebook post 35 full years later. Regardless of Janelle's whereabouts, her case was still very much alive, as the world, and especially Janelle's parents, were haunted by the question, what happened to Janelle Matthews? But sure enough, in late 2019, they would finally get their answer.
29.
Was found in Weld County earlier this week appeared to bring an end to a 3-decade-long search for a missing 12-year-old girl. The Greeley Tribune is reporting they are those of Jonelle Matthews.
On Tuesday, July 23, 2019, at roughly 4:50 p.m., a crew had been digging in an isolated field in Weld County, Colorado, in order to install a new pipeline, when they would uncover the decayed remains of a little girl. It was Janelle, still wearing those clothes that she had worn to her recital, meaning she had likely died the very day she disappeared, having been killed by a single gunshot wound to the head. Janelle Matthews had been murdered in cold blood, and almost immediately upon finding her body, the police would also zero in on their suspect. The man's name was Stephen Pankey, and at the time of Janelle's disappearance, he had been living in the same general area in Colorado. But by 2019, Stephen had long since fled the area, as after the crime, he would eventually pack up seemingly out of the blue and move to Idaho, where when Janelle's body was discovered, he just so happened to be running for governor. And during his campaign, Pankey had put out a bizarre Facebook post about Janelle, calling for the Colorado DA to oversee a fresh investigation, as he stated that the local police had wrongly been focused on the theory that Janelle's disappearance was a child abduction and murder, which was quite convenient, as just a few months after posting this, he would be arrested for the abduction and murder of Janelle Matthews. Police believe that Janelle had first caught Stephen's eye when he was working as a janitor at the church she attended, with this leading to him stalking her and eventually abducting her on that fateful night, where he threw Janelle in his car and ultimately ended her life, for no reason other than his sick satisfaction. He then proceeded to bury her in a field 20 miles away, in a spot that he was certain no one would ever find her. Now, the evidence supporting this is mainly circumstantial, but it is incredibly concerning. Just one day after Janelle's abduction, Pankey decided to take his wife to California in order to celebrate the holidays with his parents, with this trip being completely unplanned, as his wife was only told of it literally the day of. And making things stranger, when they returned home, Stephen's car conveniently caught fire and was burned to a crisp, to which he offered no explanation for. But in response, he would take the car to a local scrapyard where it would be even further destroyed, taking any potential evidence along with it. But while this is all strange enough, police say that the main indicator that Stephen was their man was his clear obsession with Janelle's case. Shortly after the slaying, Stephen began listening and watching any news reports he could on Janelle's case, while also having his wife read every single article about the missing girl out loud, to which he would often have her repeat them over and over again. But his obsession didn't stop there, as he would then start frequently calling the police, wanting to talk to them about the case, even going as far as to give them potential leads, as he claimed to be fearful that he was going to be blamed for the crime, despite having seemingly never even met her. And it was during some of these many unusual phone calls that he was said to have given details on her disappearance that were never actually made public. His obsession was entirely uncanny, bringing up her disappearance at random even decades later, with his Facebook post being a perfect example. And as it turns out, one of Stephen's most incriminating statements came as a result of something he mentioned in that infamous message. In it, Stephen says that his son Carl had been murdered in 2008, which is in fact true, as the murder was actually fully solved, with it being confirmed that Stephen had nothing to do with it. But when he was mourning the loss of Carl, something unusual happened. His now ex-wife recalled that following Carl's death, Pankey never once cried, until the day before his memorial service, where she watched him from a distance walk up to their son's urn and begin to sob, eventually blurting out, "I hope God didn't allow this to happen because of Janelle Matthews."
Karma.
Despite maintaining his innocence to this day, Pankey was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 2040, his conviction coming 12,634 days after Janelle Matthews' disappearance, with Pankey's cryptic Facebook post serving as a dark relic of his twisted obsession that would eventually expose him as Janelle's killer.
Bro, that's crazy, actually.
I want to give a massive shout out to my buddy Ryan, aka
Alright,
Nexo.
man.
A lot of
That's the end of this one. Bro, imagine, bro. Oh my gosh. That's crazy. But I'm gonna end it here. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one. And like I said, you know, join up in the Discord. I have a channel in there that you can put like video ideas, you know, all that kinds of stuff. Anything you guys want to see, or just leave it down in the comments below. I read every single comment anyone leaves. So, yeah, that's the end of this one. Thank you guys so much. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.